Final Q&A. So, what was the hardest adjustment during your first year of teaching? Honestly, the hardest adjustment was just adjusting to everything at once. There is so much change happening. Depending on where you go, you might be somewhere where the temperature is wildly different from what you're used to. The language might be different. The culture is obviously going to be very different. Being away from family is very hard. And doing that all at once is very difficult. Um, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of self care, and I'm sure you're going to hear that a lot over orientation. Um, for me, that meant that I spent a lot of time running at the Jesuit secondary school, running around their soccer field. It also meant that talking to my community mates and saying, "Hey, when I come home, I need a half hour to decompress before I engage with the community." That self care was so incredibly important for me and made me a better human being, a better teacher, a better community mate. Um, if I had religious present at my school, what was the relationship like with them? So Gonzaga is interesting because it's a Jesuit school, and during my time of being there, there was always one Jesuit who was assigned Gonzaga, but it wasn't his primary job. So, for example, initially Father Charles was the Jesuit assigned to Gonzaga, and he was primarily the pastor at the local church. And so Gonzaga was just like a side thing where he'd come and check on the school. The same thing with it when Father Charles moved to go back for further studies. Brother Shiggy came, and he was primarily the accountant at Loyola, the secondary school, and so Gonzaga was another side thing for him. So the Jesuits came. I would see them at school every now and then, but they were not there every day or all day. The sisters, like I mentioned earlier, are the administrators, and they really carry out the day to day of the school. Um, it was initially challenging working with the sisters, I think, because, like I said earlier, as a woman who is used to speaking her mind, I needed to learn to not do that. That was not something that was part of the culture. They're not something the sisters were accustomed to having other people do to them, let alone their employees do. Um, so that was challenging. It was really challenging. But ultimately, I think my favorite relationship out of all I had was with our bursar, another Sister Eugenie. There were two of them. I would just go to her office and hang out and joke with her, and we would listen to Bob Marley together. Um, and it was amazing. It was amazing to have that relationship with someone who understood being far from home and what that's like to be homesick. Um, I really appreciated that about all the religious I worked with because most of them were away from home. Were maybe in a different country, a different culture than where they came from. And so there was a sense of solidarity there that was really amazing to feel. Um, the people at my school that provided mentorship opportunities um, were honestly my coworkers. I think a lot of the schools in Tanzania, at least, have teacher offices where there's just like a bunch of desks, and so the people whose desks I sat between became my greatest mentors. They helped me figure out small challenges. I could look at them for their lesson plans and figure out what in the world I was supposed to write. Things like that. Um, What keeps me motivated to teach? Yeah. So I'm doing this video during quarantine. We've been in quarantine for about 2 months now. And during this time, one of my students from when I taught at Gonzaga reached out and asked if we could Skype. And so we did. I was like, oh wow, this is amazing how the world puts us together. And if you remember, I taught third and fourth grade. So he was very young, 8 or 9 years old, when I saw him. And now he is a freshman at the University of Johannesburg in South Africa, studying biochemistry. And there was something he said to me during that call. We were reminiscing about memories of being in the classroom and things we did together. And he said to me, you know, teacher, I always knew that you loved us. Every day, I knew you loved us. And I think that's why I keep teaching, and teaching in the communities in which I do. I really think it's important for our youth to know that adults care about them and love them and are there to help mold them into marvelous young men and women. And it's just a true privilege to be able to do that. I really feel privileged to be able to walk alongside so many young men and women to help them feel cared for, and that they can feel so cared for that 10 years later in their freshman year of college, they still think about their third grade teacher and how loved she made them feel. I think that that's so powerful, and it's why I continue to do the work that I do. Just final tips for you. I firmly believe. I mentor a lot of teachers, a lot of first year teachers here in the States. And one of the things that I always tell them is I can tell who's going to be a successful teacher right away. And the way in which I'm able to tell that is based on how many questions they ask. If they are afraid to ask questions, they will not succeed. If they are humble enough to ask those who have been there, who have done it, they will succeed. Teaching is really hard. It is not an easy career. And it's so important to lean on those who have learned how to do it well. And the only way you're going to learn is if you admit you need help and ask questions. So ask questions. Ask your second years, ask your coworkers, ask your administrators, ask them to look at your lesson plans, ask them to come observe you teach. Ask them. If you think it's a stupid question, I can guarantee you it's not. All the mentees that I've had, all their questions have been valid and have helped them become stronger in their practice. So please ask the questions. And that goes for people who are joining JVC who aren't teachers as well. Ask the questions. You're going to be doing really hard work. It's amazing work, but it's hard work. And the way that you're going to succeed is by asking questions from all those around you. I also have a final tip. My first week as a JV, I was at the Loyola Academy. It's not Loyola Academy. That's Loyola Academy is here in Chicago. Just Loyola Secondary School. I was running around the football field. And one of the Jesuits came out and talked to me about Friday dinners. The JVs in Dar es Salaam every Friday go to the Jesuit community and share a meal together on Fridays. And he shared with me how meaningful that dinner was for him, because he said, I understand that the Jesuits have their own community and the Jesuit volunteers have their own community, but I also believe that together we are a community. And I took that and ran with it. I would go to Mass every Tuesday morning at the Jesuit community. I'd have breakfast with them afterwards and head to work. I would go to the Jesuit house just to chat with some of the priests, ask them questions, hear stories about things. The ability that we have to develop a community with the Jesuits is amazing. And it was one of the most impactful things in my time there. So, my last tip then is to remember that your community is beyond your fellow JVs. It's also the community you have with the Jesuits who are there with you in your community, supporting you, who are going through similar experiences as you, who are working in these placements. They are there to be a resource, to pray with you, to share stories with you, and to just make you feel at home. Yeah. And that's all I have.